Hi, this is Dr. Alana James, and today's conversation is about planning your graduate work, be true for master's or doctoral students, so that it blends easily with your life. It's a conversation that is based on principles and practical ideas and research as well. So thank you for joining us for this, and let's get started. Our goals for today are to compare your experience with the others that have taken this survey. So if you haven't taken that survey, you might want to go ahead and do that. And to ensure that you have the tools and the ideas you need to sail through your graduate program for this year. And to understand that with a bit of planning, you can actually take everything to a much higher level. And with some discipline to make it become part of your life, I think that these tools are great for all of us, whether we're graduate students or not. I certainly use them in my life, and I hope they're helpful for you. We're going to start with a quote from Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. His work is a basis for the 3 conversations. This is one of them. And he says, the more aware we are of our own basic paradigms, our internal maps, our assumptions, the more we can take responsibility for them, examine them, test them, and listen to others and open up to others' points of view. So it's about self-awareness. We see that whether we're talking about the transferable skills from graduate school, or we're talking about being a good writer, self-awareness underpins a lot of things. Becomes obvious that if we want to make a relatively minor change in our lives, we can focus on our attitudes and our behaviors. But if we want to make significant quantum change, we need to work on our basic paradigms. For most people, graduate school creates significant quantum changes. I hope that's true for you too. It's part of what makes this so much fun. And finally, highly effective people really do not manage time. They manage themselves. I think that's something to contemplate over and over for all of our lives, that we don't have to manage time. If we do a good job of managing ourselves, time follows along. So what's our agenda today? We're going to discuss both the practical and the philosophical, starting with the survey, going through a number of concepts, but really focused on the third bullet, the Covey Quadrant. And then we'll just briefly introduce or perhaps provoke some self-reflection on a number of ideas, ending up with tools and exercises that might help. This is in a preface, if you would, for next video, which is about loving our graduate work. And it built, so the things that we do today are independent from, but will be built upon also in the next video. Let's start with the 5F survey. Now, what you want to remember here is that everyone, yourselves included, who are taking this survey have already been successful at college education. The reason that's important is because a lot of people look at what makes you successful in college in terms of certain basics. Time management, for instance, would be one of them. And yet you have already gotten an undergraduate degree, so you've already proven yourself successful there. So then I think it's a different question to ask, what are the frustrations you have with graduate school? And then education can work to improve itself and improve your experience. It's a dual process, an interdependent process. So what did we find? Now, this particular slide is made when the N was 140. It's now about 300. So let me just go over what the stats look like as of today. By far, majority have been taken by doctoral students. That's about 85%. Students who would consider themselves one or let's say 95% consider themselves one or more of the following categories: ethnic minority, non-native English speaker, international, older, or working full-time. Those are traditionally seen as riskier places to be because graduate school was not originally designed for populations with that much diversity. So 95% of the people had one or more of those. 50% had more than one. Most attend the university in the United States, that's about 52%. Second is Europe, that's about 35%, and then South America, Africa, and Asia come in under 10% each. And it's reloading my data. At the time, it was 140. As you can see from the slide, 55% had difficulty with work-life balance. 48% felt like they didn't have enough support, and 31% felt that graduate school was somewhat ambiguous. And the trends are about the same. H has dropped just a little, as we would expect, but all are still within a couple of points of where they were at that time. And we have, for 2.5 years now, we haven't seen these data change very much. So, where are we going to start? A good place, excuse the cough, is with what are our personal principles, our roles, and our centeredness. And this leads you to then how do we make choices, how do you make choices based upon these things for your time and what you, how you work out work-life balance in your own life. Principles. There are basic principles that we all live by. And when I gave this particular conversation as a webinar, the people in the room said that their principles were to live the best day I can every day, that every person is of value, to go for success, to trust that I've been endowed with unique gifts to offer the world, and not to fail at doing well or helping who I can. So those were examples from people in the room. The basic principles that you live by affect your living, and we can only, and this is true for all of us, we really only experience true success and enduring happiness when we integrate these into our basic character and into our everyday life. So it's good to think about what they are and not just sort of drift. No enterprise or person can become or remain truly great without a core set of principles to preserve and to build upon. And acting out of principle can be preventative, such as preventing disease or problems by aligning with our lifestyle with the principles that go along with good health. So those were all from Stephen Covey. And as I said, when I asked the people in the room what principles guided them, it was a variety from just basically believing in ourselves, doing the best we can, treating other people well, and continuing to strive for success. So, but based on like layers, on top of our principles, we have the roles that we play, and they certainly influence our lives. So what roles are you responsible for? And then looking at that, what matters most to you? So when we, again, going back to what happened in the webinar, the roles were teacher, friend, partner, boss, being a go-to guy, teacher, student, friend, mentor. And what mattered from those same people was family, and then connections with others, having friends, doing well in school, doing well, becoming the most you can be, being with people we love, and finding inner peace and joy. What matters most are the things upon which, when we have crisis or stress, will be the ones we vote for with our time and our energy. So if your degree is high, then you'll make sure you always make time for it. If your family is significantly higher than your degree and your family endures some hardship during your degree, you will find that your degree suffers. These are the reasons that it's important to realize where we are on these and what matters to us. And then that leads us into the conversation that is the center for today, which is Stephen Covey's quadrant. And here it is. He sees two matrices: what's important and what's not important, and what's urgent and not urgent. So we make choices, first off, on urgent or not urgent. And most of us have quick knee-jerk reactions to certain things. In the book, he used the example, the telephone rings, and how people in a business might be in a meeting and would leave a person who had come prepared for a meeting 15, 20 minutes waiting while they answered a telephone call. So that's the positionality here. Telephones, so for some people, email, for some people, notification from Facebook. For most people, when your boss drops something they think is urgent on your desk, those are the qualities, or those are the things we put in the urgent and important. Now, sometimes we respond as though it's urgent, even though in reality, it's not important. So that telephone call might have been waylaid, as might waylay us, but could also be just delayed. Same thing with emails, certainly social media. Things don't have to be the interruptions that they are. So our first question is, how many of the things that we respond to as though they were urgent fit in which of those two quadrants? Then let's look at important or not important. Important would be the things that advance our life plans. So when we looked at what roles we played and what mattered, the things that mattered would be important. Our family matters, to most of us, our work matters, different degrees. Our school matters, again, different degrees. So you have to decide for yourself where you put the different things in your life. And I suggest in one of the exercises that comes at the end of this is that you spend a day and you simply write down everything you do in whichever quadrant it belongs in. Now, the most important quadrant here is the not urgent but important. And why that is because things that really advance us aren't usually urgent. They are the underpinnings of our life, the principally driven things, the relationship building, the vision building, the bringing balance to our life so that we have good health, doing things that bring discipline into our thoughts. Those are usually not urgent. And school is an interesting mixture between urgent and not urgent. Oftentimes we start our education for not urgent reasons. We want to advance, we want a new career, we have always wanted to do this thing. But then when we're there, some of the things that go on have urgency because they're deadlines. Still, if the whole reason for being there is in the not urgent category, it may be that you're there and you're using the deadlines to make sure that you get the things done. But I, for one, would suggest that the whole thing comes under the not urgent category because you are building your life with it. Now, the people in the room had some disagreements with me on this. Adrienne said that she chose things that had to be urgent and important as her first thing to do. Things like health, self-growth are important and urgent, yet they also can't be rushed. So perhaps the quality of not being rushed helps us put it more in the quadrant 2, in where it resides in our heart and in our lives. So Adrienne also said that going to graduate school is not urgent, but it takes time to grow and mature. So we were talking about whether or not quadrant 2 was a graduate school was a quadrant 2 thing. Nikki said that her study was in quadrant 4, but when it comes into place, when everything are completed, studying is a luxury. And that is an unfortunate moment for a lot of students who sometimes find that they delay too long, or that graduate school gets difficult. So if you find that your tendency is to look at where you put your schooling as a quadrant 4 kind of thing, because it doesn't feel urgent and you have so many other things to do, then you might consider that the danger in that, the unintended consequences, that sometimes it can take you a long time to get done. We also talked about what were quadrant 2 activities, and personal interest, things of personal interest, and things that will, Mary said that in her life, she would do things first that were her family and her house oriented, but those were to calm her down and to get her ready to study, which she would have put in quadrant 2. And we talked about motivation, extrinsic motivation, meeting with her supervisors, having deadlines, and intrinsic motivation, the breakthroughs in thinking, the self-management, the fun things about school. So once again, suggestion here, you think about this quadrant for yourself. Where do you put your schooling? Where do you put the rest of the activities in your life? How do you manage your life in this way? And that takes us into some back and forth philosophical, practical questions that you'll want to ask yourself that develop out of this. So proactive is going after what you want. Reactive is responding to or reacting to something that came through as though it might be urgent. What do you do with the groups that you work with? How are you proactive? Do you make them win-win situations? So how can your behavior in these groups advance? These are all things that are excellent for transferable skills from graduate school to the job market. How can your behavior help everyone succeed? These are the soft skills. How do your principles support these things, and what roles are you fulfilling in the groups that you're in? More thought questions. Then you take those ideas into your graduate life, those soft skills, and you, for instance, if a graduate student had the principle of cooperation as being important, then they might take some extra time in relationship building, which was quadrant 2. So that's you're thinking ahead. You're thinking, where are my principles and where am I going to spend some extra time? And then you might learn that your some colleagues you're working with, or your committee chair, or your supervisors at the university level have deadlines coming up or other things that are going on, and you would then respond differently because you were aware of those challenges for them. So for instance, you might have deadlines coming up for your own thesis or dissertation work that you have to get in at a certain time, but you're working with an advisor, committee chair, supervisor, whatever your university calls that person in your life, and you know that they have particular deadlines. So you try to put your work in a place that best suits their deadlines, which also helps them get it back to you. That's the essence of this, getting to work together to have a win-win situation. Well, that means that we have to know what we can influence. A couple of pieces of research come up when we talk about personal influence. Seligman, and you'll know that I'm particularly interested in positive psychology, has sees that when people are kind to other people, there are three different kinds of benefits. They benefit the person who you're kind to, of course. They benefit you because you feel good about being kind. But the interesting thing is it also benefits, and this is measurable biological benefits, to the person who's just simply witnessed an exchange of kindness. So what we can do, we can influence things ourselves. We can always influence ourselves. We can influence others, and we can sometimes influence the wider spectrum outside of that. Covey says the challenge then is to do the greatest amount of good with the smallest amount of resources. And we'll go more in the next few webinars into this idea of beginning things with the end in mind. Understanding needs to happen before we can be understood, and this and the influence go together with what can you influence and what you can't. So you have to understand first what's going on with another person and where they are, and then you can see what scope of influence you might have. You always have control over yourself, your emotions, etc. Sometimes they're difficult to have that control, but we do have it. Things completely outside of your control have to do with things that have we cannot control someone else's response. We cannot control what someone else thinks, but we can influence these things if we act out of our principles and we're doing the very best we can. And that circle of influence can grow, as it does, for instance, with social media, when it can be picked up and carried on by others. So that leads us to then ask, in a negotiation, and much of the things that go on in graduate school and in transferable skills and other kinds of work have to do really with negotiation. Who is the better negotiator? And I ask the people in the room, is it someone who is crystal clear about what they want and why? Is it someone who understands the full dynamic of both sides? Is it someone who knows the other side is on their side, or so they go in knowing that really this is a win-win kind of place? Or is it someone who's suspicious? No one thought that it was someone who was suspicious, but we had quite a bit of conversation really about 1, 2, and 3. Coming in some people's mind to the conclusion that 2 really can embody all of 1, 2, and 3. That we understand, we're crystal clear about ourselves. We also understand with that same kind of clarity on the other side, and we're ready to negotiate from the point of view that we don't have to be suspicious, that everyone is on the side of having a good outcome all around. So, maintaining work-life balance. Why did I talk about negotiation? Because sometimes we have to negotiate with the other people in our lives to get that work-life balance. So say you've looked at this and you've seen that it's just too full because you have a lot going on in your life. You may be working, you're a grad student, lots of things. So what you do is you focus on what you can do in quadrant 2. You always focus there. And then you look at the things that fall out in the other areas. You dismiss the ones that are not important, and you negotiate the urgent ones that you really need help with. So that leads us to our exercises. There are two. First one is to define for yourself what's frustrating. Take the 5F survey. And then also to define the principles that are most important for you to live by, what matters most, and what roles are in alignment. When you know those things, you go on to exercise 2, which is to look at Covey's Quadrant and plot your weekly activities, and then look at the things that are most frustrating to you in the 5F survey and see what can be done. Also plot those things in Covey's survey and then negotiate. Think about the people in your life and what understanding might help deepen those relationships, both professional and personal, and see what aspects you can move even to even greater outcomes. The reason for this is at the end of the day, our relationships determine so much of the quality of our lives that having just effectively used time management to get things well done and made the right negotiations is only half of the work-life balance. We want our lives to work. We want our relationships to work. And there's no reason they can't as long as we start and continue to develop the habits that are in Covey's Quadrant 2. One of the people in the room, Adrian, gave us something that Evernote calls an Eisenhower matrix. It is essentially the same thing as Covey's. Perhaps Covey got it from Eisenhower. I don't know, but there's a link that I added that where you can find a tool if you're an Evernote user. And in order to think about this next year, there are possibly a lot of other tools that might come into your planning cycle. So I thought I'd go through those. These are available from Doctoralsnet and MasterNet on the portals, whether they're your university portal or the main site that's for individual users. So if you're just starting, look at the maps under each menu item and plot how you're going to get from one place to another and what milestones you want to have done at what times. It's good to have deadlines to our strategies. That leads us into backwards mapping. There will be a number of videos on this strategy. Those are links and titles to things that are on the website. If you look in the search menu on both the main site and also the resources menu site, type in planning or the word backwards, you'll come up with a number of resources. Those are the best. And then you may look at yourself and think, this is my year to improve my academic writing. There's a new box set to help you do that. Or maybe I just need to have a habit of writing at all. There's a 30-day writing challenge. Maybe I need more information about this whole work-life thing. There's a 30-day work-life challenge. And if you just sometimes need to have a little bit of good, positive, research-oriented thought come to you to keep your mind going on the graduate path, we recommend the 365 motivational emails. They're really well received by the people who get them. So I hope that was useful to you. From all of us at Doctoralnet and MastersNet, we wish you the very best with your graduate work. Until next time.